Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another round of Basis Picks. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, an associate, an enemy, any and all in between. It's appreciated. Huge weekend coming up, arguably the biggest weekend in the year, to date or to come. Some other people may have different versions of that, but yeah, look, we got Lewis Crocker versus Paddy Donovan, the rematch. We've also got Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford, and we've got Inoue versus Akhmadaliev. So I'm gonna be talking about those three fights. Let's see how long it takes as to whether this becomes one video or three, but I'm gonna do my best to try and be as concise, detailed, and non-biased as possible with all of the fights. So yeah, let's see where we go. Without further ado, let's get into the picks. So we're gonna start with Lewis Crocker and Paddy Donovan, as that is the first fight taking place. We're gonna do it in chronological order, which I think is appropriate. And look, where do I go with this one? So first off, in the first fight, I have to admit, Paddy Donovan surprised me a lot. He was actually a lot better than I gave him credit for. I thought before he was a serviceable fighter, decent enough fighter, but he always looked like he was kind of laboring to his wins, even though there was a lot of stoppages and whatnot. It just seemed a bit, you know, ho-hum and run of the mill. But in that fight, he showed me progression, he showed me skills, intensity, you know, he showed me footwork, he showed me angles, punch variety and placement, all that stuff that you need. He also showed me a lot of the dark arts of boxing as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So his level and the perceived level of where I think he can get to is much higher in my estimation than it was before. Now, on the other hand, you've got Lewis Crocker. Lewis Crocker, very big 147 pounder, you know, the kind of guy that will literally bulldoze opponents. And his it's weird because prior to his fight with Conor Walker, you would very much see he just felt like a guy where it was inevitable. He was either going to wear down the opponent, stop them, or something. I think at that point he must have been about, what was he, 17-0, 18-0. Now he had 11 KOs, so you thought to yourself, okay, is he really? He looks big and burly, but he's not really getting a huge amount of people out of there. That also being said though, he did have quite a few 4-rounders and 6-rounders to start off with, so maybe just he needed a bit more time to kind of acclimate and fully get himself into that level. But having looked at the like that Conor Walker fight, it definitely made me believe, especially considering that I think that Walker won that, and I think he won it handily and was robbed. I didn't really see much of a ceiling for Lewis Crocker, if I'm honest. So then when the Paddy Donovan fight came along, the first thing I thought was, well, Paddy's going to be a good slick boxer, but Lewis is more of the, you know, he's going to be a bit of a bulldozer. He doesn't hit the hardest, but he has a pretty good work rate. And I thought that would be the thing that would kind of take over in the fight. We saw how the fight played out, and ultimately, like, Paddy Donovan pretty much dominated and beat down Crocker for 6 of the 8 rounds that the fight lasted. Or was it 9 rounds? Yeah, it's 8 rounds it lasted in. Now, Paddy Donovan, the problem here, here's where my issue with Paddy Donovan is. He is extremely dirty, and I think just the fact that it was highlighted as much in the Crocker fight, maybe that was because, look, you're fighting, you know, the fellow countryman. It's the eliminator for a world title, so you got a little bit extra vim, you want to rubber stamp it. But most, I would say 95 to 97% of the head clashes were all as a result of Paddy Donovan. Yes, Lewis Crocker was coming forward with his head down, leaning over his front foot, which is technically not allowed, but his head stayed in a constant position at all times, or at least the majority of the times, whereas Paddy Donovan was constantly bringing his head up into range, trying to use his head to split the guard so that he could drive shots through, but in turn splitting the guard, he's also bucking his forehead into Crocker's eyes, nose, cheek, wherever it could land. There was a lot of intentionals, not to mention, as I've stated before, the intentional elbow that he landed in the fifth that the referee seemed to completely miss. And then subsequently he ended up getting a point deducted after that for something else. But that to me was the most blatant cheating in the fight that deserved reprimanding. So here's my one concern. Firstly, Lewis Crocker cannot be as bad as he was in that first fight. If he is, then it literally goes to show that he lucked his way into this position, and he probably should hang up the gloves now, because he's not the biggest of punchers. As I said, he's 20-0, but he's only got 11 KOs. That's just over 50% rate. So you don't hit the hardest. You don't seem to be very malleable. You don't seem to be able to change and adapt. So what are you? Just a big, tough, burly guy. But when you face someone that's got some movement and some nous about them, you're always going to get found out. That's the way you would kind of look at it. But I have to believe he's going to be better for this fight. Whatever may have been wrong the last time, they need to tighten it up. Now, he, by trade, is a pressure fighter. That's his style. He can't do anything different. So now he has to work on either being a lot more defensively sound, working behind a much smarter guard, maybe being a bit more sensible with the way he comes in and out of range, or he has to throw his hands a lot more and maybe risk getting caught in exchanges. But maybe if he keeps Paddy Donovan busy, then he may have a lot more success, and then Paddy may be the one that's forced on the back foot. That's what I'm going to assume on his side. On the side of Paddy Donovan, however, to be honest, there's not a huge amount he needs to change, apart from the dirty tactics. Now, I was going to say something that may have come across a bit controversial and a bit like stereotypical, so I'm going to avoid saying that, but I'm sure anyone watching may understand where I'm coming from when I say this next statement. My problem with Paddy Donovan is, as good as he was in that fight, he was very dirty, very intentional, and even after being warned multiple times and even getting points deducted, he was unable or unwilling to change. That's a concern, because the greatest boxers, the best boxers, they find a way to win, but they also find a way to adapt. If something is not going right for them, or there's a problem that's happened and now you've got to adjust, how good are you? Can you adjust on the fly? Can you make those alterations so that whatever infractions or whatever issues you were being possessed with and posed with prior, you no longer possessed with that? Floyd Mayweather was brilliant at that. Like if there was a situation, something would happen, okay, he makes the adjustment to make sure that that stops happening. If he was given an infraction, he would do something different that would just, divert the attention away from that moving forward. Alexander Usyk is very good at being able to make adjustments to stop certain things happening. And I think there's a certain DNA within Paddy Donovan that just stops him from either being able to be fluid enough to make those adjustments, or having the temperament to be able to make those adjustments. That's where I think the biggest concern in this fight comes from, because no doubt Billy Nelson, Lewis Crocker, the entire team are going to be on to whoever the assigned referee is in this fight. Look out for everything. He's dirty with his head, ref. You saw the last fight. You saw the elbow. You've seen the punches after the bell, which, by the way, he did more than one in that fight. So you've seen all of this stuff, and they could then use that as their advantage to play up to it, to frustrate and wind up Paddy Donovan in the ring so that he actually starts doing a bunch of that stuff, possibly either getting himself disqualified again or opening up to where you then get a chance to, throw your counter shots and cause some serious damage. These are all things that he's got to look out for. But does he have the temperament to be able to control himself and change? Andy Lee does, Joseph Parker does, and other members of the team. I'm not sure if Paddy does. So that's the question that I have in this fight. That being said, while I do think that the Crocker team will be better, I do think that they will maybe try to play up to some of the previous stuff to get into Paddy Donovan's head and maybe try to get a lead from it. I think Paddy Donovan may lose points again in this fight. I can see him doing some stuff that will get him with some point deductions, but I can see a very similar scenario whereby Lewis Crocker, ultimately what he does outside of maybe just increasing the volume, there's nothing else that he's going to be able to change. He's not going to become a back foot fighter. He's not going to end up being fleet-footed. He's going to still be that same flat-footed plodder walking forward with the high guard, trying to get into range to sweep hooks to the head and the body. And I just think Paddy Donovan has got that style sussed out, especially the fact of coming in the southpaw stance as well. When he's utilizing it very well, I just can't see anything other than Paddy Donovan winning again. However, on this occasion, I do think that Lewis Crocker will be a bit more defensively sensible, especially around the eyes. I would hope that he doesn't end up catching the same kind of eye injury that he did the first time around. And I reckon he will have a bit more success, and maybe Donovan will have some issues whereby, again, points get taken off, etc, etc. But based on that, I'm still going with Paddy Donovan to win this fight. But I do think it goes to points this time. I think it goes to the cards. I think Crocker will learn enough to be able to not get caught with certain things, or to play up certain infractions so much that Paddy Donovan and Andy Lee have got no choice but to stop being as effective as they were. And so because of that, I think Donovan wins, but I think he wins on points, and I'm going for a possible split decision, especially considering it is in Belfast in front of Lewis Crocker's fans mainly. So, you know, anytime he lands, anytime he even looks like he lands, crowd's gonna go up, and there definitely could be influence with the judges on that one. But I do think Donovan will do enough to get through the fight to make it convincing, but it could be, there could be one controversial card there. But I am going for Paddy Donovan to win via decision. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we go to the big fight of the weekend, arguably the biggest fight of the year, with I don't think anything going to be able to top it. Two pound for pound greats, whether Canelo is in the top 5 or just in the top 10 at this point, and Crawford is by a lot of people's standings towards the bottom half of the top 5 currently. But 2 pound for pound greats, one current and one former undisputed champion. Terence Crawford coming up in weight from 154 to 168 pounds, in a weight class that Canelo Alvarez has reigned supreme in since 2019 at this point. Was it? Yeah, 2019, late 2019, early 2020, when COVID sort of took over. So look, my thoughts. First things first, I'm a huge admirer, supporter, fan, not fanatic, of both individuals. I think both of them have had fairly exemplary careers. One maybe more than the other has had a couple more chips lay in his favor than the other, but both guys shooting for greatness. We've seen the press conference, we've seen the open workouts, all that sort of stuff. Let's get into some general keys to victory here. Now, for Canelo Alvarez, I think it's quite clear what he has to do in order to win this fight. He has to basically show why he's been the guy at 168 pounds for the last 4 to 5 years. The first thing he's going to have to do, he's going to have to employ and get some movement back into his legs. He can't just sort of try to stalk forward cautiously with Terence Crawford. Canelo has said on numerous occasions that he likes and he prefers fighting the bigger guys because generally they're a lot slower than him, and you know, he's very comfortable and confident in his defense and cool under fire, so he likes to be able to beat them from a technical aspect and you know, use his increased speed over them. Well, this is an occasion where he will not have the speed advantage. He may have very similar hand speed in a one solitary shot, but he will not have foot speed, and he definitely won't have the same levels of dexterity and agility as Terence Crawford in the ring. But he's gonna have to get his legs in motion, get them working, be able to find ways to not just cut off the ring, but close the distance and close it down properly. Now, will he try and do that behind maybe using his lead hand to push Crawford back towards the corners, double jabs, triple jabs, quadruple jabs, maybe not even to land, but just to make sure that he stays just on the outside of that range and constantly pushing him back? Will he take a half step to the side every moment he feels that Terence Crawford wants to turn and adjust? Will he cut off the entry points? Will he leap into position, which is obviously would cause its own dangers and risks? This is all things that are very, they're plausible tactics in order to make sure you get there. Is he going to just try and stay center of the ring and basically outbox Crawford from the center? My personal opinion is that he is going to have to be very active in this fight, a lot more active than he's used to being. He can't just try to walk Crawford down, stalking him, trying to land one big shot to the body or the arm or the bicep or the chest or the chin. He's gonna have to let his hands go, and let his hands go a lot more frequently than he has been doing as of late. Now, personally, I think one of the reasons he's been very content to not let his hands go that much, number one, because he knows that the people that he's facing are slower than him, he's able to counter them. But number two, he trusts that he can stop their work rate and their activity. In the case of the William Skull fight, we pretty much seen that he barely was able to land anything, but Skull didn't engage either. So he's had a lot of that where he's just been content to kind of go through the motions, walk the person around the ring, hit them with a few shots here and there. In the case of people like Jaime Munguia and John Ryder, who actually did try to come to fight, he enjoyed those fights because they were close up. He didn't have to go chasing, he could stay still, conserve energy, and sort of throw those power shots as and when he chose. That is his comfort zone. That's where he wants. He's going to hope that that Terence Crawford is coming, number one, for a fight, but is coming for the knockout. Because if Crawford's coming for the knockout, that means he's going to have to engage a lot more than most of Canelo's other opponents have. And I think that Canelo is going to attempt to get on his bike and get those legs moving and sort of try to get after him from early, but is soon going to realize that he doesn't have that in him anymore because he hasn't used it for so long. It's almost like it's like sometimes, you know, when you don't apply a skill that you've had for a long period of time, you lose it or you dull it until you have to work on it. And I don't know if one camp is enough for him to be able to work on getting that movement back that he had before, when he used to be the back foot counter puncher in a lot of his fights. So he's gonna have to get active on the front foot. He's gonna have to basically take huge half steps to the side anytime that Crawford is anywhere within range, and position him into areas that he wants. He's going to have to use that lead hand and get Crawford backing up. He's going to have to be able to at sometimes try to even get in on the clinch, seeing if he can maybe push Crawford slightly back towards those corners, towards those ropes, so he can, you know, start letting off his own shots. And I feel like he's just going to have to also be Canelo. He's going to have to show that there is a clear difference in power and durability up at this weight division that you've never been at before. ultimately he's got to be Canelo. He's got to be the Canelo that we all remembered from that incredible 168 run, and even some of the 160 and 154 runs as well. He's got to go back to showing people why he was that pound for pound legend on the on the leaderboard. On Terence Crawford's side, however, look, if we look at fights where you've got a similar-ish type of style to Canelo, you've maybe got the David Avanesian fight. Errol Spence isn't a direct comparison, but he has similar traits in terms of, except that he's a bit more output heavy than what Canelo was. Sean Porter isn't a vibrant comparison either. He doesn't have a huge amount on his resume that would give you that sort of that comparison. Possibly you might say Mean Machine could potentially have some characteristics and traits that you could use as an example, but I would say probably David Avanesian is like the most comparable, in the sense that, you know, he's front foot pressure fighter, will come up with the high guard, try to tuck up, catch and counter, try to slip the shots, and sort of move in that fashion. So in terms of what Terence has to do, now I'm going to say something that's very controversial that most people may not agree with, but a lot of people think that for him to win this fight, he's got to basically box on the outside, be on the outside of the range, box and move, not engage, stick to, and basically sort of just allow Canelo to walk onto shots. Now that's an interesting tactic, but the question with that is, can you sustain that for 12 rounds at this new weight and at a pace whereby you're clearly comfortable and that he's not comfortable with? I don't know if he can do that. Now, he's a phenomenally talented guy. He's super fit, but he's been fit with different amounts of weight. He's at his walk around weight pretty much now, which is what he said, but he's still, has he ever done anything like from an athletic and professional standpoint at that walk around weight for a consistent period of time? Again, as we talk about in sparring, you can get hit in sparring, but as soon as if you get hurt or you get buzzed, they normally stop the sparring or they dial it down. Whereas if you're in the fight, you get hit and you get hurt, you're in trouble until you clear your head, or until the bell rings, or until the referee jumps in. So it's a whole different dynamic there. I'm not worried about his mentality. I do think that he will go in there, not let the crowd affect him, and he's going in there with a point to prove. But in terms of being on the outside of range, I actually think it would be a lot smarter for him to play this fight very close to Canelo's chest. And I'm going to tell you why. Even though he's got the much longer reach, and in theory you could say, well, if you stay on the outside, you can keep him at range, you can throw your shots and he can't get close to you. But if you're going to have to constantly move, that's more energy and effort that you're having to exert. Whereas a lot of people say that Canelo's the bigger, stronger guy in this fight. Now, in terms of frame, muscle density and all that stuff, he may be the bigger guy, like size-wise, in terms of, yeah, just his dimensions. He's not the taller guy, he doesn't have the longer reach, but I've maintained from the start, I don't believe he's the stronger man. I think due to the fact that Terence Crawford's got this wrestling background, yes, he never did it in the amateurs or anything like that. He never did it in the Olympics or anything. I mean, like, he didn't do it professionally or, you know, as a career. But the fact that he's got that Greco-Roman, that background, that ability to displace body, that ability to be able to move different masses just by positioning, being able to, you know, stop someone else's forward momentum just by the dip of a shoulder, or the slight adjustment of a leg placement, or where you put your arm. Like, I've seen him take down guys that are about 100 pounds bigger than him. I've seen footage of him do that. Again, we've all seen the infamous video, or I hope we all have, of him deadlifting like 400 pounds in jeans with no warm-up. Now, look, I deadlift a lot more than 400 pounds, but again, we're talking no warm up, and we're talking a guy that at the time when he did it, I believe was probably walking around about 150 pounds. I would be pretty sure. I think he can probably bench press a lot. I think he could maybe squat quite a bit as well. But my point being, him being as strong as he is, I think if he was to get on the inside and actually clinch and wrestle with Canelo, especially after maybe throwing a 1-2 exchange and then getting on the inside and making Canelo try to push him off, that's going to drain a lot more of Canelo's energy than it's going to drain of his, because he's used to being at that close quarters combat. He's used to being in a position where he can manipulate your body and your movement. And by Canelo being forced to, throw him off, especially considering that we all believe at this point he probably doesn't have the greatest gas tank, hence why he doesn't throw a lot of shots, hence why he seems to manage rounds, especially towards the end of the fight, once he feels like he's comfortably in the lead in this day and age. That could be the tactic that you use to try and wear him down and tire him out quicker. And then by the time you're doing that, again, it's dangerous from the point of, if he decides to throw a short shot on the inside as you're trying to get in close, you might get caught with it. But by playing him that close, he doesn't really get to throw those really short, sharp shots on the inside. You get to control him and maneuver him about, especially in those first couple rounds when he's full of energy. And by the time it gets a sort of 5-6, provided that you've done everything effectively, now you can start to work, you can start to take over, knowing that your preparation, your gas tank and your overall energy levels are better than his. Now, Canelo does a lot of training in high altitude, so he is very well conditioned. But Canelo also does, he does drink, he does, eat certain foods outside of camp. He's very professional in the sense that he's never like out of shape, but he does partake in these things. He has his own alcohol company. As far as I'm aware, Terence Crawford doesn't drink, and from what he said at some point, I don't know if this is true, but he says he's never drank alcohol. So these are all things whereby you say, okay, the intangibles all work in his favor. The conditioning, we've seen his conditioning. We've never seen him look gassed or tired or having to slow down in a fight. Even in the Madrimov fight, where he probably had to work harder than he's done in several years, he still was just as energetic in the last round as he was in the first, in terms of his composure and his will to want to get Madrimov out of there. And I think because of that, he's going to have those advantages. So try to make Canelo expend a lot of energy that doesn't just involve throwing punches. Make him move around the ring, make him have to move your size, make him have to exert those quick explosive movements in the ring. And then if that takes place and that happens, then I'm very sure that Crawford will be able to lead on top of that and actually take over the fight in the back half. But I don't necessarily envision Crawford doing that. I do see him trying to play this fight mid to long range. I can see scenarios where the first 3-4 rounds, and I think Bomac said something about this in an interview, like we're gonna test him, we're gonna test his engine. So Bud knows that he can't start slow in this fight, because if you let Canelo get 4 or 5 rounds up after 6, you're not going to win the fight on points. Even if you dominate the back half of the fight, it just won't happen, because he'll do enough that he'll at least get another round or 2 on the cards. So Crawford has to start fast, but he's also got to start in a way that he makes Canelo work. So if that means that maybe he's got to employ some lateral movement, he's got to throw a shot as he's moving, he's got to use, he can't, not to plant his feet, he's going to have to hit, spring off, and make sure that he just is constantly, scoring points ultimately against Canelo, trying to avoid any of the hard shots that are landed that we know Canelo's going to want to throw. How do I see the fight playing out? Look, I went back and forth on this a few times, because both guys are capable of winning. The likelihood of one person winning is a lot more than the other, just because ultimately, look, for Terence Crawford to win this fight, there's too many intangibles that have to all fall into place at the same time. There's too many things that we don't know if he's capable of doing because we've not seen him do it. The safe money goes on Canelo Alvarez because he's been up here. We know what he's like, and if anything, we've also got a sample size of what he does to smaller opponents, as well as the fact that he can handle the bigger ones. Amir Khan, perfect example. Amir Khan gave him a lot of problems in those first couple of rounds, and then all it took, the adjustment started to get made. He was throwing some shots to the body, managed to slow Amir Khan down, and then next thing, bang, you know, sent him to the shadow realm to the point he had to pray over his body to make sure he was okay. So you look at that and you say, well, this has got to be an easy fight for Canelo, or not easy, but it's got to be an easy victory. Like you can't, it's very hard to give it the other way. But looking at some things about Terence Crawford, like I said, I think he's the physically stronger guy in there, and I think that's going to count for a lot. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that when they get into those clinches and those exchanges, that Canelo isn't just able to dominate and move him around maybe as easy as he thinks. I think that's going to be a thing. I think Bud knows he has to start this fight fast, so he's definitely going to be active from early. And I think with his sharpshooting and his ability to be able to hit from range, I can see a scenario where he does manage to rack up a good 2 or 3, maybe even 4 rounds out of the first 6. I do think he's going to get hit. I actually, for some reason, I think I've got a suspicion that he will also get dropped in this fight early as well. Like within the first 4 to 5 rounds, I can see a scenario where he ends up getting taken off his feet. But there's just an inherent dog in Crawford that I don't think Canelo has or has anymore. Like Canelo is Mr. Money, man. He's Mr. All Business. He's Mr. I want the, I'll take the bag. I'll, victory at all costs. I love the sport, love boxing, but ultimately like big business, big money. Crawford is just sort of coming into that. I would like big money, but he, more than anything, is just a competitor. I think he's got a level of dog in him that Canelo hasn't seen at all in his career. Like, we all know that the biggest issue for probably Terence is if he gets hit, he's gonna want to get it back. But I also think that there's a certain grit and a heart that you can't quantify. You can't put in a tangible piece of evidence that suggests that you can discount it. Some people have thought that Crawford is going to feel the power and say, raw, now do you know what? I need to just take a step back. Let me save myself. I'll go points. I collect my money, and I tried, and that's it. I don't think that's the case. I think he is prepared to get knocked out to go for the win. I think he's a guy that he won't let it sit right that another guy beat him, or that he acquiesced to another guy in the ring. And I think just because of that, like I said, there's certain intangibles that normally you can't really put in. Cold hard facts will tell you that this is Canelo's fight, but I just feel like there's a strength and a spirit and a determination and almost a bit of an anger within Terence Crawford that just can't be replicated. I think he's a special talent, and I think he gets it done. I think he gets dropped, but call me crazy, I can't not see him also maybe getting Canelo with a shot he doesn't see, and him also going over in this fight. I can see both guys getting dropped in this fight, but I do see the fight ended up going to points. And at the end of it, with all being fair, all being right, I do think that Terence Crawford will win. I think that he would have done enough work in there, enough clean work, enough work that is tangible, and he would have taken enough of Canelo's best tools and attributes away from him for long enough within the fight to be able to get the consideration. I think it's going to be a split decision whatever way it goes, but I am leaning towards Terence Crawford. So my prediction will be Terence Crawford on points via split decision. Yeah, I guess you guys have got to let me know in the comments how you feel about it. Okay, so last but not least, we've got Inoue versus Murodjon MJ Akhmadaliev for the undisputed super bantamweight titles. This fight is interesting. Like, Akhmadaliev, a lot of people feel that he should have got the decision against Marlon Tapales, but he did underperform in that fight. He lost his belts, and subsequently you had Inoue basically pick up the belts from Tapales when he moved up to super bantam. And yeah, like, this is a weird fight because Inoue is 30-0 with 27 KOs. Akhmadaliev is 14-1 with, I think, 11 KOs. So both guys similar in their, I guess, their ratios of KOs to victories. But I think the biggest point here, the biggest key, is Inoue has a lot more experience as a pro. Obviously Akhmadaliev has got a vast amateur experience, but Akhmadaliev is a lot less battle worn than Inoue is. Also, we've got to remember, technically this is Inoue's 5th weight division. You know, he was at light fly, super fly, bantam, super bantam. Now he stayed at super fly for a cup of coffee. I don't even know if he officially had a full fight at that weight, but it was one fight. But the point being, he's been through, this is his 5th weight class. He's a very small guy by comparison to Akhmadaliev, who is a natural 122 pounder. Not only that, he hits hard, he's very well schooled, and he's also he's got a good chin on him as well. He's taken punches and he's been able to, survive them. He's been able to reset, get himself back together, and just follow the plan. He's a very calculated, somewhat emotionless individual in the ring. So he's a person that if it's not going right, he can still sort of stick to the game plan. Inoue is also a person he's very disciplined, and if he gets dropped and gets hurt, he comes back, he makes adjustments so it doesn't happen again. He's calm, he doesn't panic, and that's one of his greatest strengths. He's very zen in the ring. But the size difference between these two, plus the actual high level credentials of the two, is where I think this fight becomes very interesting. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most dangerous challenge to Naoya Inoue's reign at 122 pounds. And when I look at the fight and I look at the way it plays out, I can see Inoue in trouble in several moments. The one problem I have with Akhmadaliev, and it's the reason he ended up losing that Tapales fight, he can be extremely economical and he will look for the perfect shot to try and get you out of there rather than applying the pressure and slowly breaking you down. If he had a bit more of hard, fast grit and like maybe a little bit more of a mean streak, I would 100% pick him to cause the upset on the weekend. But I think he's going to coast too much in this fight, in between rounds, again looking for that perfect shot, maybe looking for a nice counter here or there. But the fact that he does decide to coast in these moments, Inoue is going to be working. He's going to be throwing that spear and jab. He's going to be trying to throw the backhand through the middle. He's going to be going to the body. He's going to be in and out, just showing that he's more active and a bit more on it and hungry. Whereas MJ, I think, is going to look a bit more labored. So I can see this playing out a bit like the Tapales fight. I think the current knockout streak ends. I do think that this fight goes the distance, but I think that Naoya Inoue will get it on points, being run very close at times. Like I said, possibly getting dropped and hurt on a couple of occasions, but the fact that he will just outwork and out hustle Akhmadaliev, who doesn't ever seem to want to just step on the gas, go through it and really have that mean streak, and is probably just relying on quote unquote Uzbek power to get him through the fight. I don't think that's going to be enough. With someone like Inoue, you've got to be constantly on them. You've got to beat them down round after round, break their will, a bit like what Joyce did to Joseph Parker. And I just don't think Akhmadaliev has that inherently in his nature. So for that reason, I am going with Inoue to win this fight on points, probably a majority decision or a unanimous. It could even be a split, but I reckon majority or unanimous decision will be the pick, with Akhmadaliev probably feeling like he was hard done by, but everyone's saying he just didn't do enough. That's sort of my opinion on it. Please let me know yours down below. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the predictions for the main events. Please leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you disagree, tell me why. I'm happy to hear it all. We will be doing the watch along for Crocker and Donovan, probably starting about 8:30. We'll get the last 2 to 3 fights in there, and we will definitely be waking up at a nice brisk 2 a.m. for the Netflix card, and we'll be doing the watch along for that as well. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to do a watch along for Inoue and Akhmadaliev, but we'll definitely keep an eye on it. Fight Talk Live after that. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. I'll catch you on the next one, but for right now, Spaces Picks locked.